WADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar. Good afternoon and many thanks for tuning into West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM. This is Newslink. Here are the top stories. 3 coastal states from the ECOWAS sub-region to benefit from U.S.-assisted program to prevent the spread of violent extremism. Liberian President George Weah shows citizens of quality and affordable healthcare across the country.
As a result of our resolve to prevent and control diseases, we have won the battle against smallpox, polio, Ebola, as well as COVID-19 pandemic, among others.
Guinea's former First Lady, Adjapong, dies in France after a brief illness. And Paris warns its citizens against visiting the Sahel region due to insurgency threat. Stay with us for details of these stories and more.
Here is James Adjapong with Newslink.
Glad you could join us. 3 coastal states in the ECOWAS sub-region threatened by the fast-spreading violent extremism from the Sahel will receive long-term assistance from the United States. Officials from the U.S. State Department identified Côte d'Ivoire, Benin, and Togo as the beneficiary countries. This announcement came shortly after the Vice President Kamala Harris' 3-nation tour of the continent in March. Martisi completes the story.
The United States is preparing for long-term assistance for Côte d'Ivoire, Benin, and Togo, threatened by the spread of violent extremism from the Sahelian nations of the ECOWAS sub-region. Senior officials from the U.S. State Department revealed that the support was crucial to prevent the progression in the Sahel of mercenaries from the Russian private security company Wagner deployed in Mali. The department is also seeking additional funding, including through the counterterrorism budget. Recall U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, who visited Ghana in March as part of growing U.S. efforts in Africa, pledged $100 million over 10 years to build resilience in crisis-affected states. Several factors, including climate change and bad governance, are said to be among the causes of violence in West Africa. The competition for scarce resources, particularly water and grazing land in the Sahel, has significantly impacted the conflict that has killed thousands of people and displaced millions over time in the region. Gregory Lugurfo, a senior official in the Department of State in charge of the fight against terrorism, additionally explained that his government wants to assist, but only governments that are more interested in a holistic approach and good governance to deal with the problems, especially in areas where resources are limited.
Martisi filed that report. Burkina Faso is grieving over the brutal killing of at least 44 people by suspected terrorists in multiple attacks on 2 villages in the Sahel region. The government over the weekend said the raid occurred at Kuraku and Tondobi villages in Seno province on Thursday and Friday. Earlier this year in February, the Islamic State group claimed responsibility for killing more than 70 soldiers, wounding dozens and taking 5 hostages in an ambush on a military convoy in the north. However, the junta says during recent airstrikes, it neutralized several dozens of suspected terrorists, destroyed their bases, and reclaimed lost territories. So could this be the reason for last week's massacre? Rego Kafando is a Burkinabe journalist.
For some, it's normal to have this kind of attack because the terrorists need to make revenge from time to time and to say that they're still able to do something, they're still able to attack some villages. But what's important for them is the number of villages reconquered and the numbers of the population that has gone back to the village. And I think that with time, even these attacks will have an end.
So chances are that the attack last week was a reprisal.
For them, most think that it's a reprisal of the many attacks that the soldiers made through many regions of the country to take back villages and regions that were in the hands of terrorist control.
The government has issued a statement, and they are still issuing more to see how much they have achieved in the fight against insurgency. But is the reality of these statements by the government reflective of the reality on the ground in Burkina Faso as a country plagued by insecurity?
Yeah, the reality on the ground is has been more and more improved because apart from this attack we get yesterday, you can even notice that 2 weeks more than 2 weeks ago we didn't have an attack, and generally people think we are in the good direction.
Rego Kafando is a Burkinabe journalist speaking over there. Away from that, Liberian President George Weah has recalled his government's commitment to providing quality healthcare to citizens. Since the end of the decade-long civil war in Liberia in 2003, poor infrastructure, lack of human resources, and inadequate funding of basic services are said to be undermining vital health services. WADR's Darlington Pokpa has more in this report.
Speaking over the weekend, President George Weah said despite the challenges, his government will continue to collaborate with partners such as the World Health Organization WHO to revive the country's health sector. He said since coming to power in 2018, his administration has instituted a series of policies and reforms to ensure the achievement of universal health coverage.
My government will remain committed to the advancement of quality public health care to all Liberians. As a result of our resolve to prevent and control diseases, we have won the battle against smallpox, polio, Ebola, as well as the recent deadly COVID-19 pandemic, among others.
For his part, World Health Organization country representative to Liberia, Dr. Peter Clement, indicated that the president's commitment is in line with the Sustainable Development Goals of leaving no one behind in achieving universal health coverage.
There's a strategy that the government launched almost 6 or 7 years ago, more on increasing access to health care for people whose health facilities are far from these communities. And it resonates well with the Sustainable Development Goals of leaving no one behind. So it means we need to find every way or mechanism to reach everyone with health services.
He assured that the WHO will continue to collaborate with the government and other partners to ensure that everyone has access to quality health services across the country. For Newslink on WADR, this is Darlington Pokpa reporting.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
If you are just tuning in, this is Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM, and we are streaming all around the world on WADR.org. Let's cross over to Guinea as the population mourns the death of the former First Lady of the Republic, Adjapong. She passed away on Saturday following an undisclosed illness in France, where she had been living since the September 5, 2021 coup that ousted her husband, President Alpha Condé. On Sunday, family, relatives, friends, former ministers, activists, and supporters of the former ruling RPG Arc-en-Ciel gathered at a residence in Conakry to express their condolences. Late Jene Kaba was described by many as humble and generous woman who devoted her life to women's empowerment as well as the vulnerable. More details in this report by WADR's Conakry Chano Afa Ibrahim Abade and voice in our studios by Oge Obierica.
The news of the death of the former First Lady Adjapong Kaba was first announced late Saturday. By early Sunday morning, a crowd of activists, supporters, former ministers and MPs stormed the home of former President Alpha Condé to express their condolences. Kiridi Bangura, a former minister and Secretary General of the Presidency, and Jalikatu Diallo, former Minister of National Unity, recounted their memory of the late former First Lady Adjapong Kaba. Former Prime Minister Kabin Komaram was also cited among the dignitaries that gathered at Condé's residence. During the reign of the former Guinean leader, the late Jene Kaba was very involved with the former ruling party to support her husband. For Salum Cisse, Secretary General of RPG, Jene Kaba's death is not only a loss to the party, but the Guinean people. The body of the late former First Lady is expected in Guinea early this week. But before that, it must transit through Turkey, where her husband Alpha Condé is in exile. Condé already warns that he does not want the current authorities to be associated with the funeral of his wife. The burial, according to sources, will take place in the city of Kankan on a date yet to be announced.
That was a report by WADR's Conakry Channel Alpha Ibrahim Abade and voice in our studios by Oge Obierica. Away from that, the Media Foundation for West Africa, MFWA, has petitioned Ghana's Attorney General to intervene in the alleged abuse and unlawful detention of journalist Noah Dame. Dame works with an Accra-based community radio station, Radio ADA. The deputy station coordinator has been charged with publishing false news on Facebook, alleging that a resident who participated in a protest against a controversial salt mining concession has been abused by the police at the request of the mining concession owner. According to the foundation, the police should stop harassing Dame for a Facebook post which is clearly of public interest, while asserting that the journalist should not be detained and subjected to criminal investigations in a jurisdiction where defamation is not a criminal offense. Benin's economy is doing well and benefiting the local population. A team from the International Monetary Fund affirmed this in its end of mission report on Benin. During its stay, it analyzed the mismanagement and the effects of the implementation of the financing disbursed to Benin. The growth rate for 2022 is more than 6% higher than expected, which presents Benin as a model of a vibrant economy. IMF further announced its commitment to increasing its financing to the country. Constant Loken is the IMF country team leader for Benin.
There will be a disbursement of $68 million that will go to the state project, and this will bring the total quantum of disbursement to date of the program to $360 million. And I would like to make a point at this level to indicate that $360 million is a disbursement after about 9 months for a program that lasts 42 months. So you can see that more than half of the funds of the overall program will be disbursed, and this is something unprecedented. For the government programs that we support, the disbursements are usually small and gradual, but in this case, we have a huge amount of disbursements that come at the beginning of the period, and this is a sign of trust that the IMF has in the Benin government. And so we see an economy that is increasingly solid. The estimate suggests a growth of 6.3% of the GDP in 2022, which is higher than what was envisaged when the program was designed. We believe that this reflects the government's robust and balanced response to the war that is unfortunately still going on, and we have seen an increase in support for the population while remaining within the parameters of the program. This is an effort that we would like to salute.
The IMF country team leader for Benin, Constant Loken. You are listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of our top stories. 3 coastal states from the ECOWAS sub-region to benefit from U.S.-assisted program to prevent the spread of violent extremism. Liberian President George Weah assured citizens of quality and affordable healthcare across the country. Guinea's former First Lady, Adjapong Kaba, dies in France after a brief illness. And Paris warns its citizens against visiting the Sahel region due to insurgency threats. Still ahead, we have our newspaper review, guest interview, and some sports updates. Stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
If you are just tuning in, this is West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM. Don't forget you can always follow our discussions on Twitter and Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. Finally, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, and Mauritania have been marked as high-risk destination locations for French tourists. The French Ministry of Foreign Affairs on its website said this while urging its citizens to show extreme vigilance. And also, according to the advisory, the risk of attack and kidnapping targeting Westerners is significantly high in the Sahelian zone, but also in neighboring countries. Abdullahi Hassan reports.
The alert from the French Foreign Affairs Office last Friday comes days after the release of journalist Olivier Dubois, who was abducted in Mali by the Support Group for Islam and Muslims, JSIM. Violent extremism by groups in the Sahel, especially in the tri-border area between Niger, Mali and Burkina Faso, is still tense. The location is home to jihadists, including Daesh. Recall 6 French people and the Nigerian working for the French NGO Acted were killed in December 2021 by armed men on motorcycles during an excursion to the Kore Giraffe Reserve, 60 kilometers southeast of Niamey. The French Foreign Office warns its nationals that their presence in these high-risk areas compromises their safety because the proven risks are incompatible with tourism. Meanwhile, the Institute Montaigne mentioned in recent times some anti-French sentiment in the Sahel, including the attacks against the French embassy in Ouagadougou and the French Institute in Bobo-Dioulasso on October 1, 2022. The regular demonstrations in Mali, Burkina Faso or Niger against the French presence and the looting of French stores in Dakar in March 2021. According to the analysis published by an independent think tank in January 2023, diplomatic relations between some ECOWAS countries and France have deteriorated lately.
Abdullah Hassan for that report.
This is the newspaper review. Stay on top of the news. Get the most important stories with added insight and concise review.
This is the newspaper review.
Up next, we have our press stories from Abuja with WADR's Usman Umar.
Hello and welcome to the press review segment with me, Usman Umar from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. Today we have 2 papers for review and of course we'll be looking at the Guardian newspaper, which has its motto as conscience nurtured by truth. The Guardian is leading with this story on UK revises foreign health workers recruitment, returns Nigeria to red list countries. It's good to know that some of the riders to this headline says, outrage over bill mandating 5-year pre-licensing practice for Nigeria-trained doctors. Bill poorly researched, reels out inaccurate figures. Federal government's brain drain committee report not implemented, group inactive for months. If bill becomes law, government officials should also stop medical tourism. This is coming from an activist, Mr. Tomori. Now, of course, this particular story has to do with the way Nigerian trained medical doctors easily gets to leave the country for other countries after having trained in Nigerian universities due to a number of factors, including poor remuneration, very poor infrastructure in the medical sector, and a host of other reasons. And therefore, it is in the considered opinion of a lawmaker in the Senate proposing a law that will make it mandatory for anyone trained in any of the Nigerian medical schools to, of course, practice for 5 years in the country before being allowed to go to another place to practice. You will also be looking at KUKA tasks Nigerians, next government on nation building. Reverend Father Matthew Hassan Kuka is the Archbishop of the Sokoto Diocese of the Catholic Church, of course a very vocal priest who at every given opportunity, he never shies away from, making comments regarding governance in Nigeria. And so this time around in his Easter message, he made a lot of calls, including calls to Nigerians, that is the citizens, and of course the next government, that is the one to be sworn in on May 29 at all levels, that they should pay more attention to nation building. Now, let's look at the second paper, which is going to be our last paper for today, the Nation newspaper. The Nation has this banner headline, Governors under pressure over security vote spending. federal agencies, Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, Economic and Financial Crimes Commission seek movement of accounts to CBN for proper monitoring, be moved to the Central Bank of Nigeria for the sake of monitoring so that expenditures from this account can be monitored, because this is one account that is so popular, yet no one knows how much goes into it. But it is believed that huge amounts of the budget goes into these accounts in the name of security. But no one at the end of the day gets to account for how expenditures are done from this particular account. This is the much we have for you on the press review segment today. Until we come your way again, I remain Usman Umar, and it's back to you.
Thank you, Usman Umar, for that newspaper review.
Politics,
Analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
On our guest segment today, we have Mohib Said, an advocate for press freedom in Ghana. He will be discussing with us the reported abuse and unlawful detention of journalist Noah Dame, who is employed at Radio WADR, a community radio station in Accra. Dame is facing charges for allegedly posting false news on Facebook about a mining concession owner who had requested police to use force against a protester during a demonstration against a controversial salt mining concession. During our discussion, Said would address the human rights violations that have occurred in this case, as well as the potential impact on the reputation of the press in Ghana, which has been a concern raised by many.
Well, our concerns are that the journalist is being persecuted by the police, and we think that it is important for the whole world to know what's actually happening so that the journalist's rights are not abused. First of all, to put the issue in context, the company called Electrochem Ghana Limited, owned by one Daniel Macaulay, has been given monopoly to mine salts in the Adan area and on industrial scale, and the youth of the town are up in arms against this company, which they accuse of grabbing their livelihood from them. And so it also appears that the traditional authorities and the police are also on the side of the company, and therefore there is some form of repression of dissent regarding the operations of the salt company. And it is in that context that we can appreciate what is happening. The journalist wrote that a young person in the town was being abused by the police. He has actually been tied to a hospital bed, and the journalist is claiming, that is, Noah Dame is claiming, that this was an abuse of the journalist at the instance of the police. First of all, he was summoned on accusations, on defamation complaints by the Electrochem Ghana Limited. And finally, the court dismissed the case only for the police to arrest him and charge him with publishing false information.
So what are your requests of the Attorney General at this point?
It is important that everybody gets to know whether the chaining of the young man to the hospital bed was something that actually happened. And if it did, then the charges of publishing false information should be dropped. And that is our appeal to the Attorney General. We're also appealing to the Attorney General to ensure that the police officers responsible for the abuse of that young man at the hospital are also brought to book, because the police cannot ignore that serious incident of abuse of the rights of a citizen and only pursue a journalist who is a whistleblower for letting the world know what's happening.
Finally, what is this? This is not the first time the Media Foundation for West Africa has commented on abuses against journalists and press freedom in the country. But on a larger scale, is the foundation concerned about the fact that we're having a number of these cases cropping up?
We are deeply concerned, and in January, we actually issued a statement. In fact, it was a report on the abuses that journalists have faced in the country over the past few years. When the president recently delivered a State of the Nation address and indicated that press freedom and freedom of expression had reached very enviable heights in Ghana, we again came out and disputed his claim and put the facts before the whole of the country. So we are deeply concerned about the deteriorating freedom of expression environment in the country.
Muhib Sayed is an advocate for press freedom in Ghana. And here is Sankole Janko with some sports updates.
Hello there, warm welcome and thank you for joining us. CSBN Sekusila from Guinea have been crowned champions of the boys competition at the inaugural 2022-23 CAF African Schools Football Championship Continental Final played in Durban, South Africa. Meanwhile, Fortin Gate School of Tanzania were also crowned as the champions in the girls category. The Guinean representative, CSBN Sekusila, overcame home favourites Claham High School on penalties in the final following a thrilling 1-1 draw played in front of 6,000 spectators at the Sugurey Zulu Stadium. The West African contingent, Guinea and Gambia, took home gold and bronze in the boys and girls competitions respectively. Meanwhile, in the girls competition, Fountain Gate from Zambia took home the gold medal after a 3-0 win against Moroccan side Ecole Omar Ibn. The winning teams each received $300,000 after the Motsepe Foundation donated $10 million in the inaugural year of the Pan-African Schools competition, according to CAF. In boxing, Nigeria's Israel Adesanya reclaimed his middleweight title after a knockout win against beaten rival Alex Pereira at the UFC 278 in Miami, Florida. Nigerian avenged his previous defeats against Pereira in 2016 and 17 and at the UFC 281 in November. The 33-year-old Adesanya unleashed two crushing right hands to send Pereira 35 to the canvas. Speaking after the victory, Adesanya was quoted as saying, "I hope every one of you can feel this level of happiness for one time in a lifetime." And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
Thank you, Sankole Janko, for that sports update. We have come to the end of this edition of Newslink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to our listeners in the Gambia via Hot 104.3 FM Banjul, and in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM Lofa County, and in Ghana Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi. Christian Mukidi has been exceptional on the console. Many thanks to Mustafa Sek for our Facebook Live coverage. Do interact with us via our social media platforms on Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is a rebroadcast of our health program, Wellbody with Imo Edit. I am James Adjapong. Good afternoon.
News, talk, music, get it all 24 hours on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar.